right, Mr. Vinnie Fisher, back on the Unicorn Perspective. It's always a blast to get to chat with you. We always have such a good time, and you share so much wisdom, both not just professionally but also personally. And we got a late start today, mainly because I picked your brain about being a dad and some of the struggles there, and you always share really good insights there.
Well, thanks for having me, bud. It's so much fun when you get to spend kind of like let your hair down, and I got a lot to let down with a good friend who is always thought provoking and challenging me to bigger thoughts. So thanks for having me, bud.
Of course, man. Can Let's start there. Can you really like let your quote unquote the luscious locks that you have
Yeah.
let your hair down? Like I always wonder that because our companies are a fraction of the size of the company you're running,
Yep.
and I find it incredibly difficult to kind of turn off, even when I'm in conversations or doing certain things where I'm trying to think one way and not worry about it, but there's always something in the back of my mind. So I'm curious how much more difficult that has gotten, or if it's even changed, if it's kind of just stayed you get to a certain point and it kind of just stays there no matter how big you get, of like us talking for the next hour. If you're able to say like I can truly zone in here and tune it out, or if there's a period where you're like, I'm wondering if that's getting done, I'm wondering what's happening here, we just hired these 5 people, like what's going on there?
I'll tell you, I am really thankful for something that's playing out in my life, right? So you'll always hear me see things like Dan Sullivan may have coined the popular version of it, but like eat your own dog food. And so for me, I speak a lot about a CEO really needs to be a CEO. And what does that really mean? Like, I think I spend the vast majority of our time on our executive team. And because of that, I, honestly, I'm not trapped in day-to-day activity of our company. Now, I don't want anyone's ear to hear that wrong. It doesn't mean I disappear. That means that the organization is bigger than me and that it can run without me and it can operate really in a lot of ways in spite of the shadow that I cast on it. So when I get on a show like this with you, I actually I have all those responsibilities. Heck, I've got a responsibility of our new building that's being built, and we're going to be moving in soon, and responsibility of my bride and my 4 kids, and we have 100 people on the team. There's all kinds of those things, but really, I am so thankful that I'm leading now as a CEO better than I ever have in my career, and that has allowed me the flexibility and discernment to really invest in the people who are leading aspects of our company.
Do you think that's common? We were talking about this the other day internally as partners, of the CEO at a startup and the CEO of a company with 10 20 employees, and the CEO of a company with 100 to 1,000. Like it's I find it very rare that there is a founding CEO who's able to continue to grow and stay at the level they need to with a company as it grows from a million to 10 to 100. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and like how you've been able to continue to stay at that level as the company grows and as there's new challenges that arise that are just bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex.
Yeah, it's funny, Max. I think to honestly answer that question requires me to look at the whole journey of my leadership. And, I broke a few of our companies before this one, and they were 8-figure companies. One of them I broke tragically and wrote a book about it, and called The CEO's Mindset. And, I think that's true. I think when someone starts something, taking it to certain levels, sometimes you need to hand the ball off. Right now, I think the season that I'm in about running this organization, I think it has to come to an end at some point. I think you can run it to a certain level. And then I think with great maturity, you would either through effort, attitude, or ability, you might look to others if you have the maturity to look at yourself correctly. But I'd say that some of that early founder syndrome stuff was burned in my other companies.
Yeah.
more than so in this one. And my maturity in this one speaks to a stat that I'm always compelled about. Someone most successful entrepreneurs in form of growth and impact happen between the age of 45 and 55. And I think that speaks to this idea of the immaturity of me as a younger leader. I'm not to say that people can't overcome that. It's just to say that, my brashness played out a little worse. My impetuousness played out a little bit more real time when because I didn't have as many at bats or, maybe some of my wisdom. And so I suspect some of the traits of classic founder syndrome are showing up less now because of my earlier hits.
That makes sense. I think it's interesting when you look at you know, the kind of Silicon Valley backed startups and you see them,
Yep.
The unicorns, right? It is very, very rare to see a Zuckerberg, right? To see somebody that has stayed the leader of a company from a dorm room to one of the biggest companies in the history of the planet, right? Like that's a
Yeah, I think you got to call him a
anomaly.
unicorn. I think you
Yeah.
have to say he falls into that
Yeah.
category. And I think part of my where I am, where you are, which is why we're good friends, is that this attitude of always be self-developing and always be learning. You learn a lot about yourself, and there's limitations I have. Like, I most often think bigger than most people. I'm also a realist. I can push people, but I also am really not very good at operations and process. So instead of me like acting like I can do it, why don't I surround myself with excellence who can do that and do the things that I can do? So for me, I had to work on hero complex. I think a lot of founders who fall in love with their baby have like a kind of identity and image in it. And the unicorns survived that. And the rest of us, have our levels of either persevering or being taken out by it.
Do you find yourself at some point being like, because you guys are growing so fast and there's
Yep.
so many factors, both
Yep.
internally you control and external, that are just right time, right place in a lot of things, and also just
Yep.
executing and crushing it internally. Do you find yourself like, this is what I personally feel for me and for some of my friends and stuff, is like, I do you want to be running you know $100 million billion company, or do you just have more fun starting things and getting them to 10, 20, 50 million, and then being like, I'd rather just bring, let me bring somebody else, let me sell, or whatever it might be, and I'm going to go back to that kind of world that I like, which is ideation and kind of being the founder for you, because you've started plenty of businesses, you've had lots of successes, you've had lots of failures, you've had these incredible journeys. With Fully Accountable, do you see that being something, hey, like, this is the thing I want to continue to ride now, and I want it to be a $1 billion company, I want it to go public, I just want it to keep growing as a private company, or like, I want to get it to X, and then I'm going to be happy with where it is, and then I want to go do X, Y, and Z and continue building cool things?
Yeah, two things. I have a high emotional equivalent. I really like people. I like helping them be really good at what they do. And so as a result of that, there's usually more people in a bigger enterprise.
Yep.
So even though I started things, I'm actually better at helping people improve things than I am at starting things. Now, by the way, all the habits of startup and consumer behavior and all that, you got to keep that innovation around. But getting something to seven figures has its own challenges. Going from seven into eight and then nine has its own challenges. I'm going to let value proposition and the marketplace decide the size of our company. And I think that I probably am best suited with my strengths of leadership with a more mature operation, to be honest with you.
That makes sense. I think it's everyone kind of has their sweet spots, right? Of where they really shine in a journey of a company, right? There's some people who are just that great at the idea phase, and then just once you get people in there and they're not good at communicating, they're not good people, right? And they just need to kind of be out of the picture. And then you have people that are just great at motivating and leading and inspiring and working with people and have great emotional intelligence that are able to work on that growth trajectory.
And I
with you. Yeah.
I want to be fair of one other comment in there.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I'm youthful, but I also want to be real. Like, you know, I don't have a five head by accident, and I'm older, and like they call me grandpa around here, and I'm Uncle Vinny, and so it's funny. Like I feel great. I'm in some of the best physical health I've been in my life, but there's a legacy, a next generation thing that's going on in my portfolio of our companies as well as here. Like I'm trying to help develop leadership for the next generation, and so a lot of my time is spent there. And I think it requires me to be honest. Like, would I really put those efforts into a startup, or am I better off investing in leadership for legacy? And I tend to lean towards the latter, leadership and legacy. So startups are fun, and the old boy just probably isn't going to do one of those anytime soon. Maybe someone else will, and I'll be a big part of it, but I don't think I'll bring the energy to leading a startup. At least it doesn't seem to be the case at this season of my life.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So looking at, you're talking about kind of the next generation and the future and all that stuff. And I brought this up before we went live, just a topic that I thought was interesting, and I want to pick your brain on this, and I think this could go down some interesting rabbit holes here, especially because what you guys do with all the CPA work and the accounting and being that kind of really powerful back office with everything happening in the world of crypto and this boom. And we were talking about how Coinbase, just released their Q1 earnings, and it was this massive growth, right? It's 1.8 billion in revenue, 800 million in earnings, 54 million active traders, just like incredible numbers. For
Amazing.
me with it, what's crazy is it is a lot easier in our traditional kind of monetary system where you get a paycheck. The system has been built around cash, right? Just the US dollar and the way people are paid, jobs, everything's been built for that. There's kind of an easy system for tracking things, for reporting things. This whole world now of Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these different cryptocurrencies, it makes tracking and reporting a lot more difficult for both the individual, but also for the government, right? The IRS. I'm curious. Like I have some specifics we can dive into, but just like at high level, what your thoughts are on this period. 'Cause I think the last thing I'll say is, it seems to me, and I could be wrong here, that this time, 2017, I think was a lot of early adopters. It could have been a fad then when there was that big spike. I feel today, 2021, there's so much institutional support and money, and all the big players are taking either a look at it or they're getting actively involved in it, that this is here to stay. Whatever it might look like, that's another question. But like cryptocurrency, blockchain is here.
Two thing I think important answers, and I want to build on this one first. In that same press release of Coinbase's great quarter, good for them, was the actual category of cryptocurrency collectively has reached a market cap of $2 trillion. So that's a big deal. And so I think, for everyone's ear, I was trained and raised as a corporate and tax attorney. And so I have a little bit of qualification when it comes to the subject of reporting and that. And early on in my law practice, I would have done that work. And so I want to remind every American listening that the system is still the same. It's a self-reporting system. And the most abused aspect of a self-reporting system is the business expenses that we do or don't report in our company. By the way, it's the same burden. The keeping and tracking of this. Listen, let's be real. I can't tell you how many of our mutual friends, and they're great guys and gals, I'm not knocking anybody, who are calling me to find the edges to round about what to report and what not to report. Listen, the IRS is making you disclose whether or not you own Bitcoin. If you do own it, and you say no to owning some cryptocurrency, then you have already put your step one foot towards this idea of something like perjury. We live in a self-reporting system. Can people get away with stuff? Yes, that doesn't make it right. And I'm not trying to sound like anyone's dad, even though it sounds like I sound like it right now. Here's the reality. This trades like a precious commodity now, no different than gold or silver or any other type of precious metal. It's got that trading behavior to it. And it looks like it's going to have that type of trading behavior because of the limitation of what it is as a resource. All good. Great. Those things are also extremely hard to track. Do you know if I have a gold bar in my basement?
Nope.
Same thing. It has, this might be a newer technology, but the rules around reporting are really quite simple. The thing that all of us digital mavericks, we see how we can take our wallet and our masks and all these things and we can round the edges. Well, you're still living in the risk of what you're deciding, what risk you want to live in. You just are whether you're crossing the line or not, people know. And so I would say this, be careful about letting the tax dog wag the tail. I was raised in some tough conditions, and we always used to say, hey, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
It's very true. I think that's good advice, is to, especially when it comes to the IRS, to not mess around or give them an excuse to dig deeper into what you're doing. Right?
Maxwell, let me be really clear though. I believe do not pay Caesar a penny more than he's due. Of course.
Yeah.
So I believe I am what the world might call aggressive, but I think legally appropriate. Stretch the code, use it to your full capacity. Like this idea that you're avoiding an audit is bupka. You need to win one, not avoid one. Can you win it? Can you withstand the scrutiny? So in this particular instance, like anything else that requires good record keeping, it's like you and I in marketing. Whoever tells the best story wins. So if you're an owner of crypto, then you keep the records that are appropriate so that you can tell the best story. Then you'll control the narrative with our friends at the tax reporting authorities. If you lack good records or you can tell a good story, then they're going to have the upper hand in telling that story.
Yeah, that's very true. It's just what gets interesting to me is that, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but and I don't know if it's even been done, but if that gold bar in your basement, somebody could get a search warrant, right? And they could search your house and they could find, right? There's a safe, there's things in it, like, hey, you have gold, I'm not saying this always happened, but it's physically there and it can be accessed.
Discovered. Yep.
Discovered. The whole thing with crypto, right, is that it's anonymous to an extent, obviously.
Well, but hold on a second. What if, listen, I had 111 coins taken from me. That means they had to exist. Someone got my MetaMask wallet ID.
True. So if somebody gets your, so I guess that's what I'm asking is if you were getting audited,
yep.
Right? How would the IRS be able to?
It comes down to the integrity of your words. Do you want to take the risk of being caught in a situation of perjury? Right? Listen, we have a local story here in our town about a guy who was, crypto watching. You're familiar with it? Where people would run their crypto through. He'd take a VIG or it's off the top and wash back the money, and highly illegal, and amassed a fortune of almost $80 million doing this crypto washing. Well, the FBI is wanting him to disclose his accounts. Well, he was clever enough to stick him in his brother's name and so and so. So they can't force someone to give that stuff over. You're just going to pick a fight with a bully. You got to be careful. Can you withstand the fight? I've been sued by the government a couple times. And one time I let the bully kind of push me into a corner. And another time I stood up and stood my ground. To me, this idea hinging on choosing to disclose income recognition is another matter separate and apart from cryptocurrency. If you are because you don't have to report gain on something you didn't recognize gain on, it's just sitting in your portfolio. The question you have to wrestle with is whether or not you're going to take the risk of putting yourself into a situation, giving them leverage versus keeping it yourself. And that's what's going on right now. But look, make no qualms about it. That commodity has firmly established itself. And anyone who before was thinking they were the maverick, They're just ahead. They were an early adopter. It's no longer this goofy thing that's going away. It's here to stay.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Now, here's where things get really interesting. And I don't
Yep.
know if you've heard about this because it's really new. I just got on there a few days ago. But like, have you heard of like BitClout?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've heard of it. So just for anybody
Yeah.
that's listening and doesn't know, because I imagine most people outside of our sphere have no idea what it is. Essentially, it's a platform kind of built on blockchain technology, be the first decentralized social media platform. So the first use case of it is this kind of Twitter clone, where I have a profile on it, and Russell has a profile on it, and Ezra, they have accounts, and when you create your account, it creates a coin, just like Bitcoin or any
Yeah.
altcoin, any
Yeah.
altcoin, and people can buy your creator coin, and every person that buys and puts money in it, it increases the price per coin, and essentially it allows people to invest in creators, and then people can sell and stuff. It's a very interesting concept, right? I don't know if it'll go anywhere. It's just likely to flame out and explode as it is to be some revolutionary new, because it's just a use case, right? People are now going to build on top of it for like streaming and all kinds of stuff.
Well, I
Where
think
it
it's
gets-
even bigger than that. Topps, the trading card company,
Yep.
who's now the chairman of its board is Michael Eisner, who was
Yep.
the old Disney guy. NFTs are becoming a big deal. Memes and this idea of trading. I think it's building on that bigger concept, right? And so digital currency is no different than the storage of memorabilia or goods. I think we're creating categories, which is so exciting for digital people like you and I. And so, yeah, now I know where you were going with that on footprint and all that stuff and currency. Yeah, I think the wild, wild west is here, bud. I think it's all coming. But I also think that we shouldn't forget that the privilege that comes along with creating income comes along in a society that we live in with the burden that we're the higher taxpayers. I don't
Yeah.
love it. I don't want to pay a lot of tax. I never, ever, 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 ever wake up wanting to pay tax. But I do like having roads, traffic lights, trash, the rights to stay in a safe place. And if I pay a bigger burden of that, I knew I signed up for some of that. And I love our system better than most systems that are afforded to us.
100%. Let's put a pin in that last topic because I'm going to come back to paying taxes.
Yep.
But like just to finish the BitClout thing, because this is me genuinely asking you as a
Yeah.
at least not an expert maybe in specifically this stuff, but just tax law
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
so. I have no idea if this is illegal or legal. Like it's such a wild west here. But like
Yep.
this whole thing, it seems like it's getting very close to it's either straight gambling or it's investing in securities or other things that are highly regulated. So for example, like I told Ezra, as a good friend of mine, I said, dude, you should check out BitClout. This is really cool. You have a huge following. It's something to check out, like more so just for the fun and coolness of it. And so he joined, and the day he joined, like the minute he joined, he said, dude, I should join. It's awesome. And I bought $300 of Ezra coin, right? Because I know that Ezra has a great following and a bunch of other people are going to buy it. And so I just put $300 into him, right? It's worth $5,000.
Plus, who doesn't
now.
love that guy?
Yeah,
He's
of course.
just such a fun guy to be.
Of course.
Yeah.
One of the best guys in the world, gave me my first speaking gig. I'll be forever grateful for everything he's
Nice.
done for me. And so like I put it in there, and I love him and I want to do it. And it just so happened that this was like a day ago or 2 days ago. It's worth like $5,000 now because more people have bought it and the value. I feel like this system is obviously ripe for all kinds of things that you would, and if you were trading stocks, would be considered either like insider trading, pumping, like. And I'm curious, like,
Bigger
who
picture.
eventually-
You got to think above it.
Yeah.
I love your question. Regulation comes in after there has been an abuse. Regulation usually doesn't start first. Okay. So usually in all areas of expansion, you would be able to buy, you used to be able to solicit to have people invest in stuff. It was only because of the abuse and lying of what you were told and disclosed to invest in things did we start adding layers of regulation. It's not deregulated. It wasn't first regulated and then deregulated like the utilities might be. We just lack some regulation because we don't know necessarily what's parts to regulate that. That doesn't make it illegal. It just means it's innovative. It's a little bit ahead of, the law usually trails in behind. It
Yeah.
doesn't start out as a maverick.
Got it. Yeah, because it's fascinating watching, being kind of an insider in there really early and just seeing
Yep.
things that are going. I mean, it's obviously it's all people are just making wild bets, and it's just as easy. It's not realized gains for any of these people, so it's just easy to lose it
Yeah.
as get it. But like, if you're a big name right now, right? If you're Ty Lopez, Grant Cardone, any of these guys, like their accounts are kind of they're reserved there. They haven't logged in yet, but like they have like Cardone. I could pull it up. I mean, I'm gonna go to his thing right now. Let's go to Grant. Grant Cardone. He's claimed his. He must have just gotten his. But so his market cap on BitClout 644,000, and because of the way the system works, which is you can get a founder share, and somebody buys your coins, you get a set percent of coins as like a reward. So he has 26 of his coins, which is worth $151,000.
Yeah.
And I think with Ty and other people, like it's the same. Like, and then there's Elon Musk and other people on there Logan Paul, who literally have millions of dollars in coin sitting there, just like it's really
the
wild.
nice thing for them is, while one would argue that their influencer, their name, and all the things around them have value, just like this item, it really isn't recognized value until such time as you do something to recognize the gain on that value. Now, with all that said, I imagine along the way that you're going to see regulations come in that allow people to trade on the likelessness of their names of people. Because I think, to be honest, if we're going to be real, let's be honest for a second. I really am an Elon Musk fan, and I also think he crossed the line security-wise on some of the things he's been doing as an influencer. I don't think the SEC likes the things he's doing. And I think because he is actually the chairman of a public company, he has other obligations under certain rules. I'm surprised he hasn't been censured yet. And with this cancel culture, I suspect he's just got people on his side. But he has danced the line a few times. So I think what's coming is when you manipulate a security because you have insider information, and then you short swing or you gain very quickly on it. There are what's called these closed periods where you can't do stuff with things. Those rules exist. They just don't exist here yet. So I would encourage everyone to practice the smell test. If it doesn't smell right, be careful. Slow down a little bit. Have fun with it. But, is it really worth blowing the whole kingdom over a few bucks?
I agree with that. I think I was talking with a few buddies about BitClout the other day, and I was saying, like, listen, like I put, a few grand in it. I'm looking at it the same way I look at going to the craps table in Vegas. It's like, this is just fun entertainment. If it turns into a shit ton of money because it's like getting early as a Bitcoin, awesome. That's great. But this is more just like, I feel like it's part of some grand social experiment, and it's just this really fun thing.
I think any new emerging technology should be treated just like you're saying, even if it's, there's legal gambling, where you and I could call up a recognized sports book and place some of our dollars in it. It's gambling. It's legal. And then there's illegal gambling where, we could go to a, so to speak, bookie, kind of maybe my college days, where you would place a book with somebody where it wasn't appropriate. And both of those things still exist. There's illegal trade and regulated trade. We're just somewhere in the middle there. And I think it's going to end up having a lot of regulations to it. And they're just going to be the same regulations, just applied to the current technology.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? I still want to get back to the taxing. And basically the question I'm going to ask future is like, if you had control over your taxes, you'd pay more. So that's going to be the question basically in the future. But this Elon thing, it is crazy to think that there are individuals who have so much influence that they can literally change their Twitter bio to, hashtag Bitcoin and drive the price of a 2 trillion, an asset in a $2 trillion market cap up by double digits. It's incredible to me. I guess the question is, and this is kind of the question with free speech and First Amendment stuff on social media platforms, is like, where do you draw? Some human beings have to set a line, right? So with Elon, for example, like it's pretty much a no-brainer. He's so massive and he's involved. He owns public companies and all these things. But like, if I'm just an average person who has no public companies, but I have 50 million followers across Twitter, Instagram, and I say hashtag Bitcoin, is that wrong? And that drives the price up. Is that wrong? Like that, I guess is
You're
what I'm
not,
getting
by the
at. Yeah,
way, you're not held to the same standards. So the
correct.
reality is, there's a de minimis rule. If you own above a certain percentage of a public company,
Yep.
typically I like to let people think if you own more than 5% of a public company, by the way, it's lower than that, but let's just use this for fun. If you own more than 5% of a public company, by disclosure and by rules under the Security Exchange Commission, you sign up to a different set of obligations. It's just the rules. People can whine about them if they want. It's not fair. Well, so be it. Those are
It's
the
just the way
rules.
it is.
But a big old broke nothing person like me gets up on Twitter and says something that would be the same thing that Elon would say. He would be judged to cross the line, and I wouldn't.
It's interesting, especially because I feel like the game has changed, right?
Yeah.
I don't even feel like, I think the reality is the game has changed. The way the world works has changed. And so you have these regulations and laws that were created during a different period of time where, hey, somebody owns over 5% of a public company, right? They have a documented interest in an asset, and they also have influence that can drive the price. That's pretty cut and dry. It's right. This person can basically move the needle and make money on their own. Now with like cryptos and social media influencers, it's you all of a sudden have people that probably have way more ability with their influence and assets they hold in Bitcoin and stuff to drive price swings and profit off of that than a 6% shareholder in a public company does that probably may not have any following on social. And so it's interesting to see how long does that take for regulations to catch up to
So
the way the world
I would
works.
argue, just to push back a little, I think we've added some unique complexities to an ever existing thing that we can't help ourselves. The system of the world's quite easy. It's all based on money and self promotion. It actually makes it quite simple to do business in the world when you know the rule is the rule. The gospel is money. What can I do to get more of it? And so there's always been principles in the law to guard against greed. The Securities and Exchange Commission have rules about disclosures. We have a whole chapter in 16 about swings and stock and disclosures. We just need to apply them to today's innovations. I don't think the world's changed a bit. I think we've just complicated technology on top of a set of rules that just need to, I think the lawyers who are involved with policy and writing need to go and thoughtfully adopt provisions that think through this season of our life as they apply to those rules. But Elon Musk has duties and obligations. And hey, listen, let's be real. The president of the United States had his Twitter account blocked. That's a very complex statement when you think about the First Amendment. That's a far greater statement than whether or not Elon Musk has the freedom to speak openly about manipulating securities. Let's not, if we want to have a First Amendment talk, let's talk about someone's right to get up and have a differing opinion in our economy today than someone who's openly manipulating security for the purpose of gain. Those rules exist, buddy. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Do I think Elon's going down? No, I don't want to be contradictory here. I'm actually quite thankful he's done and taken some of the risks he has, because I do think that this currency needed to find its way into the commodity trading world. And I think it was going to get to a legitimate stance. And so do I think the chairman of JP Morgan Chase and others have helped do the things that need to have happen to give this a legitimate platform? Yes, I'm really thankful for that. Do I also think that people are massively doing things that are going to get them censured and suspect, maybe even penalized, possibly even delisted? Yeah, I think the problem with greed is we always overreact. So what does greed do? Greed makes someone more greedy. And heck, I just had our best record month last month, our best quarter we've ever had in business this last quarter. And this morning I woke up thinking about our distributions. I'm like, yeah, I wish they could have been more.
Yeah.
It just does itself. You can't help yourself.
Yeah.
So
The same thing happened to us.
Elon does what Elon's going to do. He just he became the richest man in the world for at least a brief moment. I don't know if he's back to number 2 or where he is because of his price fluctuation. But before this run, he was so leveraged in debt to fund his lifestyle. He's just had a massive turnaround. So good for him. And well, he is like no different than Richard Branson and other mavericks who we all kind of can relate to because he's this entrepreneur-y kind of guy. He's not your classic investment banker, money manager who's really wealthy. He's like one of us who's like really edgy and kind of lives out there, and good for him. And so I just want to encourage everybody to be very careful about lines that get you into some trouble because of other obligations that go along with words matter. Your words matter. And so that's what's been going on with me lately. My words matter. I lead a lot of people. A lot of people lean on what I do or don't say. And so I just encourage everyone to hear that part of it, not like, hey, do whatever you want. I want to be real careful with that.
What do you think about, I wasn't planning on going here, but the nature of the conversation in the last few minutes has gone here. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, of what's happened in the past week with the MLB, with Coke, with Delta, with companies that are now, we basically live in a world now where you have to pick a side. You can't be on the sideline and be like, hey, I'm just a company that sells sugar water. Like, I don't really have an opinion on voting. Like we no longer live in that world where you can't just sit there and not say anything. And it's terrifying to me, especially because I'm not a super political person. I talked about this many times. I like talking about it. It interests me with current events, what's happening, and I have opinions on it. But I'm not the person going to a rally. I've never campaigned for anybody. I'm pretty down the middle when it comes to almost every issue, but it's this consistent kind of pushing of on the social side of things, especially now that's pushing companies to get involved. And it's like, listen, if I'm running a company that runs ads, like, you don't want me involved. Like, my company shouldn't be making big political statements. And I don't know, it's frustrating to me, and I don't know where this I don't know where this ends, and I don't think it's a good place where this ends, where companies now start being proactive.
I think corporations and the personalities that lead corporations have, go back to the Industrial Revolution. Andrew Carnegie and Dodge and Ford and the Rothschilds, and you think of all this massive wealth, they have influenced policy and decisions. And also at the same time, there are agendas involved, right? People are wanting, corporate culture isn't in it to be altruistic. Like, the gospel of the marketplace is money. And so in there, I remember early on, I got some advice about, there's really no real such thing as like negative marketing. There either is or there isn't marketing. And so can you have a light shined upon you? And should people at the head of organizations be influencing policy? They've been doing it forever. And so we're very divided. The United States aren't so united right now. And that's probably speaks to a bigger cultural mandate. People feel very free to have certain open conversations and not so free to have other open conversations. And so, you can go back to the early 70s, back to the early 50s. We've had these cycles where there's been a tampering down of certain talk and amplification of other. I am quite surprised right now because honestly, MLB could have easily stayed in place and used that platform and stayed there and supported the people of Atlanta and used that as a position of change. They didn't actually have to use exit as a position of change.
$100 million.
You're not
That's
really
how much. That's how much they'll lose
because
the local economy.
well, a lot of the money that's made goes back into the urban area of Atlanta. And so how ironic that the exact position statement used for change might economically reverse course and create more division. And so, you know, we're all going to be judged for some of our behavior. And I'd say that this possibly looks like an overreaction.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the irony, and this is what's Chris. I was listening to Joe Rogan, who was talking to Dan Crenshaw, and he played a clip from that Chris Rock had recently, which I thought was really spot on. And it's obviously it was a joke, but it was also he was making a statement, which the gist of it essentially is that if you have made up your mind on an issue before you actually hear anything about the issue, you're wrong.
Yep.
Like there's a problem there, and that's kind of where we live. Is that we have a lot of people that no matter what the news is, no matter what the issue is, before they actually hear the information, their mind is made up, and it ends up being leading to a lot of hypocrisy. And like that's the fascinating thing here is if you're on the left, if you're a Democrat, you've been pushing for a long time about companies should stay out of meddling in politics, and companies, we shouldn't allow them to contribute financially to people that are running for Senate or Congress or president. But now it's actually, we change our mind. Like, we don't want you to do that, but what we want you to do is use your massive platform to basically force people to make change. So, hey, Coke and Delta, you're the two of the biggest employers in Georgia. We want you to use that massive bat you have to try to make the local government, the state government, change this voting bill. I think it's as somebody kind of sits on the outside and just watches and looks at, and it happens on both sides. It's not just the right, it's not just the left thing.
Yeah, hey, listen, it's funny. I tell my team all the time. I tell my family this. There's two golden rules, and the problem is we know one of them because it's a truth that's passed among everybody. This idea of treat others the way you'd want to be treated, right? The proverbial golden rule. But the world has another rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And so, in politics, that's no different. Things swings, elections have consequences. And so, what was once your problem is now your benefit. What was once your benefit is now your problem. And so when you have a platform playing from the minority, you got to say one thing. When you're playing from a platform of a majority, you say another thing. There's duplicity in all industries. Our politicians are certainly not short on that. Like what they were, when you were in a position of minority, you had to say something that got you in a position of majority. And, it can be exhausting. We're a large company. I can't speak like the underdog little company anymore. I got to speak from a different position. And so from that position, I'm always like, oh, go with the big mature company because we have more resources. Well, if you listened to me a few years ago, I'm like, go with the underdog because we're nimble. And like, it's a funny thing. When you have the gold, you make the rules.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And people's views and opinions on things change as their situations change, right? And that's always the way it goes. So let's.
What does a man with power ultimately want?
More power.
And so I mean, man, in a sense of a human. Women too. What do you want? More power. Yeah, it's like, why would we be surprised that you took some ground? You want to take more ground? Like, why are we acting shocked, regardless of your affiliation? Now, I will add this. I wish there'd be more kindness in our words. I pray for more compassion, grace, and mercy towards each other. I don't know that there's a revival back to a certain time or this idea of nostalgia. But if we could just do this idea today of guarding our own words and not be so bothered about measuring everyone else's words, I think we could do a lot to go forward in some healing.
Oh yeah, I think if you just focused on your life, your world, what you can control, it would be so much better. Everyone would be so much happier. It's this idea, and this, I think maybe I'm wrong, but this to me feels like a relatively new thing where there's a whole group of people they spend most of their day just diving into other people's lives, finding the bad things they've done publicly, sharing that, and then saying, and then making other things like, hey, if I was around 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 500 years ago, I would have done things differently, right? This idea that they had the knowledge they had today, they would have had it 20 years ago, 300 years or 500 years ago. It's fascinating, the culture. It's scary, but it's just seeing it from like a psychological perspective, what's going on.
The Monday morning after the Super Bowl, there were plenty of people criticizing the offensive scheme of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
Monday morning quarterbacks exist in every category. It's a funny thing. Like, as leaders, we got to be really careful not to be caught up in that, right? Because my job is to try to do my best to be present in today and look around the corner, learn from the continual mistakes I make every day and things that aren't glorifying, to seek repentance on those, apologize quickly to my team and people around me if people I've offended. But man, like this idea of like historically holding everyone to perfection, that's a tough one.
It's really, really tough. And I was going to do a post the other day about this, and I was on the fence about doing it because I was genuinely curious. Like, what do you think? Like, let's go 200 years in the future, 300 years in the future. What do you think our great grandchildren are going to be looking back at us today and being like, oh my God, can you believe they did X? Like, there's got to be things, right? Because if you lived 300 years ago, everything seemed normal to you, right? Things that we see as horrible today just seem like that's the way the world is. We don't know the future. And I'm genuinely curious, like, what that's going to be today, like in the future, like that thing we're doing now.
I can only imagine. Like, look at the way you and I, I love history because it repeats itself. So I'm a very much, Roy Williams pendulum kind of guy. I love studying history just because it's fascinating, because the heart of man doesn't change. Like the food ration lines that would have surrounded World War I, the amount of death and carnage of the Dark Ages. We call it the Dark Ages for a reason. It's an awful period of our history. I think people are going to look at this particular stage and see a lot of, we're fighting in North America over privilege, not poverty. And so we're making up some of our own fights. Now, things are real and people are hurting each other, and there's division, and there are classes, and there are social divisions. That's all. That's not new. And I think right now there's a lot of bullying in both directions going on. And so I just have a chip on my shoulder. I've always stood against the bully, because what the bully needs to do is be punched in the face. And so I tell my sons all the time, if there's a bully with your sisters, what do? Like, we know, Dad, we punch him in the face. And my wife's like, what? I'm like, yep, boys, we stand against the bullies. Right now, it's tough to know who the bully is.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You think about how lucky we are. Like, everybody. I mean, it's perspective, because there's still a lot of people who are in really tough, terrible situations, both in our country and then obviously in the third world, around the world. But you think about, it's all contextual. It's about today comparatively to what other people have. You think about like 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, like what the even wealthiest people, their standard of living was. Like, you have people that, during the Middle Ages,
the gap was larger. Until this, by the way, I just was reading this morning in a cool newsletter called The Morning Brew. For anybody who doesn't get it, check it out. Well, in there this morning, I believe it was Forbes, just put the list out of the, they call it dropping the list of billionaires. I think we added 900 billionaires in this last cycle. Ridiculous number. The gap of wealth is less than it was. The gap of wealth is not as perverse as it was go back in times. And so, because we actually had unpaid labor, there are pockets of the world where slavery does really exist, but the gap is less. That doesn't mean we don't have a gap. There is a difference between the prevailing wage and wealth. It's a thing. We're always going to have that. And so there are going to be rules to regulate some of that. Some people are going to like it, others aren't. I think the privilege of being a business owner and having the right to income, I think we have some rules that make the smaller end of business harder. I think that we have rules that make the higher end of business a little bit more accessible. But I'm thankful that I get to pay into the system that people have. I'd always like to pay less, by the way, if I
Of course.
could. But I really do love having a system of laws. Those seem to be in flux. A good mentor of mine said to me yesterday, what is a forest firefighter? What's a fireman fear? I'm like, And I thought for a minute and I guessed wind. He's like, yeah, wind is a crazy thing. And right now, the winds of change can blow things in certain directions. And I think history, looking back now, is going to either see that we controlled a forest fire or the winds blew it out of control. And we may have a generational impact we may or may not have anticipated.
And that's a great analogy. On the taxing, so I just have two questions there. So the first is, would you, this is a question I'd love for people listening to, like, I want to hear multiple people's opinions on this. Like, obviously nobody likes paying taxes and a lot of people have problem with it. I think there's two reasons why people have a problem with it. One is I think people just would like to have more money, right? Obviously everyone wants to have more and they don't like losing something. It's loss aversion. That's the obvious one. I think the second one though is that people don't like the way their money is spent, right? So they don't like the fact that I'm giving this money here, but I have no control over essentially where it goes. And I don't agree with a lot of the programs that's being spent on. And it gets, this like infrastructure bill, for example, like a fraction of the money is going to be spent on infrastructure. The rest of it's going to all kinds of crazy programs, right?
I actually think there's a first one before that, Max, okay, and I think it's equitable. Like I think you're right. People don't want to pay. The second thing is people think they're paying their disproportionate share. And then the third attitude is use of it. I suspect more people fall into the first or second category than they do the third.
So you think this, I guess, is a good answer to the question then, like that if people had, when they're filling out their tax returns, if they had the ability to essentially check some boxes and say like, hey, I want my, tax dollars to go to X, Y, and Z, you think that would, people would feel better about paying taxes, or you think it would have like a negligible impact?
They do have that right. It's called voting. And so they can vote in the officials that make those decisions. The president doesn't change tax policy. Our Congress does. And so if they want to check that box, they do it in the voting box. Now, I don't want to get back to the polarization of voting, but the reality is they already have that right. Only so many practice it. Now, we had a record practicing of it here in our last presidency, so congratulations to us as a country. But so many people don't do anything, which is why I think the third category of people wondering where their dollars are going, most people just go through the motions. The facts are the vast majority of taxpayers are at the top bracket. Most people don't pay tax.
Yeah, they get a credit.
So they have an opinion about something that they don't even do.
Yeah, they actually get money. That's the irony. It's especially this past year. It's the checks continue to go out to people that are employed, have full-time jobs that don't, like I'm happy our family. Like my Larissa keeps getting them, right? Like we 100% don't need. I'm obviously not going to return the money, but like at the same time, it's kind of ridiculous. My grandfather who's deceased, he got one, right? But even if he was alive, he was very wealthy. Like it's this crazy, just because he wasn't employed, like it's mind-boggling. And again, that's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down of just like use of funds and the other side of the tax equation of spending. But I want to respect your time. Did you hear the other day? So Janet Yellen was talking about, I got the little guy, he's getting a bottle. So he's
that's okay. Hey, that's what that baby. You should hear when they're older as teenagers and they cry. It sounds way different.
She was talking about the idea of a global tax because of, in her view, multinational companies, and not even her view. I mean, it's somewhat a reality, but it's the reason for why companies do this is not discussed. Hold money in different countries, hold their kind of IP in certain countries to pay lower effective tax rates. I don't even know how they would implement it. It's a crazy idea that I heard her mention, but it's still fascinated me. This idea that
Well,
was
it's
even
not as
floated.
crazy as you might think, right? I
Really?
mean, NATO didn't exist, until after the end of the world wars. So the idea of a World Bank didn't exist. Now,
Yeah.
there's a big thing that has to be overcome. I think in order to get something like that, there's going to have to be some centralized standard to how currency is evaluated. As long as us, who are 4% of the world's population, as long as we control the manipulation of currency, I think this is going to be a tough sell to the world. We can change our dollar and manipulate currencies. And as a result of such, we're asking the world to come along for our manipulation. I don't know if we're going to be able to sell that. It sounds like back what led to the Boston Tea Party. I don't know if we're going to be able to sell that, but we'll see. There's already a consortium of countries that are in. They may not be the ones we need to be in, but there's already a consortium of them that are in. And so we control manipulation of currency, and it's pretty tough until we standardize that manipulation. How I can imagine a scenario where the world would buy into that.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you put it, because it does, at first it does seem, when I first heard it, does seem crazy, but then you talk about these ideas of these kind of worldwide organizations forming in periods of kind of chaos or the need of it. And I guess if enough people get angry and enough people get upset, enough stuff happens, people make emotional decisions, and things like that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that didn't exist, and like the World Bank and the World Health Organizations, these were all outpourings of the world coming together to solve a big problem. Is corporate tax a world's? Is it America wanting it to lose their companies?
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to is who's really suffering and who
Yeah.
really, like, the real reason why we want it. It's like, hey, we really want to do it because we want to basically push companies back into the U.S. to repatriate all their money so we can tax it and cut some of our deficit. Like that's the
Yep.
reality. It's not some altruistic, like, we want to make the world a better place by having a global a global business tax. It would be BS to
Yeah,
think
that's all a
anything
bunch of
different.
garbage, though, right? Like, I don't mean to call our administration out, and I appreciate it, but they just don't want to lose the American taxation of dollars. Like, this is not a let's do good for the world. This is America not wanting to lose its tax dollars. Come along. Let's call it, we are the world's bully right now because we control currency.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it goes. I think we go back to the rule. The one with the gold makes the rules. Some people without the gold don't like that. And I think it's going to be a tough sell to say, let us keep our American companies. I wouldn't be completely surprised if something like it happened, but we're going to have to meet the world somewhere in the middle on that if we think that that's really going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. Actually,
Or we're going to bully them with currency and tariffs. Like,
that's the other thing. Yeah, we have the whip on the other side that we can play with to make people play ball with us.
We do. We control fiscal policy. I know that that's offensive to my friends in the UK and Australia and other parts of Europe, and by the way, we got to be careful what we wish for. China's a big player when it comes to economic policy, and we got to be careful about some of these deals we were making. Is it good or bad for us? As to the flow of cash, because as a people group, their oligarchs are more wealthy than ours.
Yes. And they also, own a tremendous amount of our debt, right? It's like, it's this just massive entanglement that we have with other countries. And I'd imagine that at some point, I don't know when this happens, and I guess we could wrap on this because we keep leading to additional questions. I want to be respectful of your time, but like this, 25% of the dollars ever printed in the last year, it's just massive amounts of money printing. And, at the end of the day, obviously somebody needs to pay for that. Like, it's, we print money, and we're China's buying our debt, right?
Just to help everybody with the Constitution, right? The founding fathers thought some of this through. The federalization of the states was designed to create deficit to help the states, balance out our economies. Great plan. But let's be really mature in money. When we keep printing out debt, we're going to lean on the world to solve our problem. If they don't want to forgive some of our promissory notes, which is where we're getting this backed money from, then we're going to threaten them with the removal of commerce or buying things. Like, we're going to bring our promissory note to the countries who are lending us money. And as long as there's leverage there, we're going to ask for forgiveness of some of those things. If we go too far and we lose our leverage, then the other is going to be true as well. At some point, we could go too far. And all of a sudden, the good old book says, don't be a slave to debt. You can't serve two masters. Well, at some point, if the debt overtakes our ability to leverage, then the other world powers are going to make the decisions that otherwise we were used to making.
I agree. I mean, I'd imagine that at some point, if you're China, you're kind of sitting there watching us just continue to max out our credit cards and raise the limit and kind of have the Chinese Amex saying, okay, yeah, we'll keep buying your debt. We'll keep floating you at this kind
but
of
in all
casino.
fairness, if people are really looking at this, lawyers, we talk about solvency. China's insolvent.
That's true.
When it comes to, if you remove the asset known as the debt they hold for us, they're in trouble. We could have put them into an awful recession if we chose. Now, depending on your opinions about that, some say, let's do it. Some say, well, careful, the world's economy, we are the two powers that currently control all that. It's interesting. I don't love the social behavior that they're getting a hall pass on, that we as a country aren't getting a hall pass on. The atrocities are awful. But what's funny is this happened in World War II, and until everyone got opened up, Germany was getting a hall pass on its atrocities.
Yeah, because they also had to after World War One, we hit them with you owe us a lot of money. Here's all these fines and penalties and punishments, and at the end of the day, like, do we want money and we're going to be okay with it? Hey, do we want to we don't want to shut Germany down, go to war with them again because then they can't pay us anymore. So we'll let them slide and slide and slide until eventually it got to the point where it's we needed to intervene. But that took a while. I mean, for the U.S., it took a while for us to actually get involved in that. It's a whole nother. I love history as well.
A really sad fact for us is we're still the number one propagator in the world of human trafficking. It's not a good look for 4% of the world's population to be the world's leading proponent of human trafficking. Like, I hear I'm a Christian, that I'm a Christ follower. When I hear people say we're a Christian country, I'm like, ooh, careful, be real careful. Like, people are what people are. We do some crazy crap right now. Stuff I guess I wouldn't imagine would be happening, but the real pandemic is trafficking of humans right now, not our current fight of the current virus that's running through our world.
That's very true. There is a ton of horrible things that I think we turn a blind eye to, and we get hyper focused on certain things like the MLB All-Star game, and we're still up until literally I think the other day. I think because probably the administration realized we need this hypocrisy here of like not being vocal about the Chinese Olympics, right? So we're going to literally make the MLB, we're going to force them to move to a different state, but we're okay going to China for the Olympics. And finally, I think we're now kind of thinking about joining that group of protesters.
And so, hey, listen, what a blessing. If the MLB's overreaction led to us really focusing on the real issue, okay, then good. I'm actually quite thankful a really overreacted bad situation led to one we should be dealing with. Yeah. If that's what happened, okay, I feel bad for the people of Atlanta, and I guess good for the people of Denver who now have it. But but if the fact that we're talking about the real social injustice of what's going on in China, if that led to it, okay, I don't love it, but we're talking about the right issue.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. I think it's forced a lot of people just out of hypocrisy and being called out like, okay, we can't do this and then not do this. So yeah, I agree 100%. Listen, I think there's we need to have an episode where we just talk about like history and stuff too, because I'm a student of history. I love history. I think it's important for everyone to read more history. I think in our industry, especially if you're an entrepreneurship business, everyone reads everything's like, what's the top leadership book, business book? And listen, there's a lot of great ones and I like reading them, but it's like there's so much great stuff you can get from reading about wars, reading about history, empires, reading about Rome and Genghis Khan and Napoleon, and like there's so much wisdom and insight.
Heck, go back to Peter Drucker. Just go to the 60s. The guy has so much massive impact on the modern version of leadership. Like as a leader, if you're not looking to the titans before us, as like I would look to the prophets of old as the great cloud of witnesses in my faith, you're missing the whole point of leadership. Like these men and women have done amazing things, and I think every leader should be looking at historical stuff to lead better. Like if you're not, and you're just looking for the next hack to get into someone's inbox, you're missing the whole point of leadership.
Yep, 100% agree. So before we wrap up, we're somebody that's watching right now that's looking to work with you guys that needs support to kind of outsource that accounting, the back office, just like high level, kind of elevator pitch of what you guys do and offer. Obviously, I know we've worked with you guys for a long time, but for our listeners, and then where they can go to, sign up, learn more, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we made it real easy for everyone during this time to just email us at wecare@fullyaccountable.com, and we'll help get you pointed in the right direction. We are a fully managed, outsourced firm that provides accounting and fractional CFO services to e-commerce, tech-enabled companies, digital marketing agencies, software and service as a SaaS, and e-commerce companies. That's where we live. That's all of our clients. We live in this digital world. Consumer packaged goods, you imagine, are crazy growing up right now, and the way digital is doing it. And we live there, and we've, I'm thankful for what we do as an impact. And the fact that we've doubled in size again is ridiculous. No one on my executive team believed we'd ever be this big, and we're going to do it again. We'll be double in size, and I'm really thankful for our team. It's the biggest asset we have, bud. We have massive resources, but our depth on our bench is ridiculous.
That's amazing. Yeah, so I highly recommend anybody that's listening right now, if you're in, chances are you're in our sphere, right? You're in that kind of sweet spot for Vinnie and what they do. Highly recommend at least, check them out, send them that email.
Hey, listen, if we're not the right fit, our team will tell you, and we'll help get you in at least another spot.
Yeah.
We're in a maturing position. We work with companies that are 7 figures, right? They're maturing. They're investing in their back office. If you're in that stage where you need more money to invest in making your offer work, we're not the best fit for you.
Yep. 100%. And it's something I know a lot of us don't like to think about. It's not the sexiest thing we're doing every day, but it is really, really critical. And if you want to actually grow and build something large other than just, a profitable offer, you need to take it seriously. So highly recommend. We'll drop the actual email address. We'll include all that good stuff.
So and by the way, in the notes, drop a thing for everyone, for your show, fullyaccountable.com/unicorn or whatever the show notes we'd put up there. But we want to give out a package, a free gift to everybody. And it's like how to go do these things yourself. And you can have my books as well as resources to go do all this stuff yourself. We're just speed and automation. We'll do it all, and we'll do it with experts. But if you want to go do this stuff yourself, take advantage of our free offering.
Love it, man. Well, as always, it is a blast. There's a few buddies of mine, a few kind of colleagues that I've had on repeatedly, and I could have them on like every week because it's just the conversations are great. There's so many paths we can go down, and unfortunately, because of the size, I have to say, okay, well, I want to go down here further, but we need to kind of continue down this path. So thanks again, man, for coming on. Thanks for the reschedule, the last minute one last time, and definitely we'll have you back on again soon.
Yeah, next time I'd like to talk about as we start to come on to this next season of life and where the world shut down and what are we going to do on the backside of it. We'll have learned things. We'll have accelerated certain behaviors, and it'll be interesting to kind of theorize about how we're responding, what corporate culture looks like, and what as a society, both local and globally, we're doing to adjust to some of these accelerated behaviors.
There you go. You got the next episode already planned out and mapped out. So we'll get that scheduled on the docket, and I can't wait to chat more with you and chat about that.
Yeah, buddy. Hey, good luck with that little boy of yours.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Bye bye. See ya.
Alrighty. Bye.